Hello and welcome to another edition of the Corner 3 here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. As always, we're in the Beaver County Auto Studios. I'm your host, Cale Berger. Good to be back with you for another week, and we're right in the thick of it, March Madness tournament time, and it was a fantastic first weekend of the NCAA tournament, and we saw a lot of chalk advance, I guess you could say. Not a lot of big-time upsets. There were a few with UC Irvine, Oregon getting one over Wisconsin, a 12-5. We'll talk about that a little later. Liberty. But some other ones that didn't come as close with Belmont, New Mexico State, two teams that I was very high on. They lost by a combined 3 points in their respective games. So certainly those ones didn't hit. But if you look at the bracket, it's a lot of the top seeds that we expected advancing to the Sweet 16. We have a 1-4 and a 2-3 matchup in the East Division. The Blue Devils taking on the Hokies and the LSU Tigers taking on Michigan State. We have a 1-12 matchup between Virginia and Oregon in the South region, but pretty much when you go the rest of the bracket, it is all chalk. It is all the top seeds. And, this has led to what I would call kind of a strange debate, or something that's been a little peculiar to me over the weekend is everyone's saying, well, this tournament's not as good as past because we don't have those same amount of upsets. We don't have a real Cinderella this year. I would slow down. I mean, as much fun as it is to see the Butlers or the VCUs or the Loyola Chicagos of the world getting to the Sweet 16, the Final Four, creating madness and havoc, I think it's still is completely fine and still just as, if not more entertaining, to have a lot of those top seeds advancing to the Sweet 16 and to the Elite Eight and eventually to the Final Four. It is definitely great to see America's Sweethearts, Sister Jean, and the Loyola Chicago team of last year getting all the way to the Final Four. That was incredible. But I think what we're seeing with this year's lack of Cinderellas or lack of significant upsets outside of the few that we had in the first round, I think it still makes for a great, engaging, and exciting NCAA tournament as we have all those top teams, those top seeds advancing onto the Sweet 16 and hopefully to the Elite Eight. Because you're able to see the best teams playing each other, which is going to give you the best matchups. I mean, you look at the matchups we have coming up this weekend. Tennessee and Purdue, 2-3. Two teams, Purdue, maybe a team that I think a lot of people had losing to Villanova, but a team that absolutely trounced the Wildcats in the second round of the tournament, getting to the Sweet 16. Duke and Virginia Tech, two teams that are from the best conference in the country, the ACC. Duke narrowly getting over UCF. We'll maybe talk about that one a little bit later. But Virginia Tech, a strong team out of the ACC that can beat you in so many different ways. That's going to be a fun matchup. We have Gonzaga and Florida State. Florida State has only lost to Duke and UNC over the teams the last month or so. I mean, they have been on an absolute tear. A rematch against Gonzaga, a team that they eliminated last season in the NCAA tournament. Texas Tech, Michigan, a 2-3 matchup. Kentucky and Houston, one we'll talk about a little later. But these matchups are all going to be great TV, great games. The best coaches, the best players in the country, and just all around the best teams with some iconic programs. And as much as we want to see the Cinderellas every year, sometimes it's just chalk. And this year, even though there haven't been those Cinderellas, it's certainly, I think, going to be an entertaining tournament from here on out. And what we all want is to see the best teams play each other. We want the best matchups. And sometimes those teams come from the group of five or from the mid-majors. Other times, they're all from the top programs. That seems to be what we have this year, but I don't think there's any problem with having those top programs, the top seeds, getting to the Sweet 16 and beyond. I don't think that's a problem at all. I think it's going to be a great tournament from here on out. And the other thing, too, is even though we didn't have those upsets early on, the games in the first two rounds were still fantastic. Talked about Belmont and New Mexico State losing by a combined 3 points between the two of them. We did have the upsets of Oregon and UC Irvine, which were exciting. But even though all those upsets didn't hit that maybe some of us picked in our brackets, I know I picked a few, but they still made for entertaining, fun games that are exactly what we look for and what we ask for this time of year. if we were coming into the NCAA tournament hoping for 20-point blowouts in every game because these top teams are going to knock out the mid-majors, I mean, it wouldn't be as fun. It wouldn't be as magical. It wouldn't be as entertaining. So the fact that we didn't get some of these upsets, but they were still fantastic games. I mean, it seems like every 1 seed had trouble with their respective 16 seed. I mean, North Carolina, for a little bit, struggled with Iona. Gonzaga, they pretty much handled Fairleigh Dickinson. But, Duke, they got a run for their money from North Dakota State. Virginia had a lot of issues with Gardner-Webb, which we'll touch on earlier as well. We're talking about some of the teams that are the most dangerous and the most vulnerable left in the NCAA tournament. But every game seemed to be competitive outside of a few from the first 2 rounds. So even if the upsets didn't hit, it still made for some great basketball that I think regardless, you look at the ratings of the first weekend of the NCAA tournament, and they're the best in over 20 years. So certainly this has been a great tournament thus far, and even though there haven't been those upsets, it is still made for a lot of fun, and a lot of people have tuned in to watch those games. The other thing, too, I know UCF wasn't able to beat Duke. They were this close. The ball just kissed the rim, rolled off. It was unfortunate for the Knights, but we still got a fantastic game out of that second-round matchup, a 1 seed and a 9 seed. And the big thing that came out of that as well is, as much as the rest of America seems to hate Duke, I think everyone can agree that it is a good thing that Zion Williamson is still in this tournament. So even though we have some of those mid-major teams and potential Cinderellas not in it anymore, I think it's still safe to say that we want to see the best players playing in this tournament for as long as possible. And if that means that some of those upsets nearly happen but don't, I think that's fine, because I think college basketball fans and just basketball fans in general want to see Zion Williamson play in college for as long as they can. They want to cherish this time because he's going to be in the NBA in just a few months. So I think the fact that we still get to see these top elite players like Zion, like R.J. Barrett, you look at Rui Hachimura from Gonzaga, Cam Johnson, Luke May, guys that are in their final years, we want to see them play for as long as possible. And if that means that we don't have some of those Cinderellas, that's fine, because we're still going to see some great, entertaining, and competitive basketball. And I think that's all we really can ask for at this time of year. But I want to take a look now at some of the teams that are left in the field. And I want to say who are the most dangerous teams right now, who is clicking on all cylinders, who is hot, and what teams are the most vulnerable. Because we saw a few of those top seeds that, although they were able to advance, they certainly looked vulnerable, I guess you could say. They showed some weaknesses, and we're going to touch on those a little bit here going forward. But first off, the teams that I think are the most dangerous. I think the first one is Michigan. I think Michigan's going to be a Final Four team, as we talked about last week. A great coach. They're led by John Beilein, who is, I think, and this isn't really an overstatement, but he's one of the best coaches left in this tournament, even with the likes of Mike Krzyzewski and Roy Williams and Tom Izzo. I mean, he's right up there. He might be number 4 if we're looking at the coaches, because he is just that good. And they're a great defensive team. They're incredibly versatile as well. They can switch. They have such great length and size. They can switch across the board, and they can score as well. I mean, Chris Matthews is finally getting his shot to fall. Ignas Brazdeikis, I mean, he has really come on strong, especially the latter part of this season. And he's just been a stud all year, though. But he's really picked his game up here into March. And they have a bunch of guys that can handle the ball. They have a bunch of guys that can shoot. I mean, there's so much to say about this Wolverines team that makes them dangerous. And they were a team that has really been up there in the top 10, top 5 all season. And I think we're seeing them continue that great play that we've seen all year. And they're going to have a tough matchup against Texas Tech. But Texas Tech has the Big 12 Player of the Year, probably the best team coming out of the Big 12 this season. Kind of weird to say that, not being Kansas for the first time in forever, but Texas Tech is fantastic. They absolutely manhandle Buffalo. But I think this Michigan team is motivated after that loss last year, the way they were beaten by Villanova, the way that Dante DiVincenzo and those guys just completely shot them out of the building. This team is maybe more motivated than anyone in the country. And I think that they're going to keep riding that motivation and keep with this solid play. And I think if there's anyone that can shut down the hot shooting of Texas Tech, it is the defensive stalwart that is the Michigan Wolverines. So I think Michigan's going to be a very dangerous team. Like I said, I think they can go all the way to the Final Four. If they're able to win, it'll set up a tough matchup with either Gonzaga or Florida State, and I think they can beat either of those teams too. So will certainly be a fun one. I think Michigan is dangerous. Another team is Houston. Houston really impressed me the way they just kind of were able to take punch after punch from Ohio State. They would get out to a 15-point lead. The Buckeyes would climb back in within 5. It seemed like 5 points was just the highest Ohio State could climb back into it. And then Houston would go on another run. But they have great play down low. They rebound well. They protect the rim. They have great guard play as well. And Corey Davis Jr., I mean, they are an all-around team. They've been one of the best teams in the country all year. I mean, they are, I think, definitely the best. I wouldn't call them a mid-major from the American, but not the Power 5 conferences. I mean, they are certainly the best non-Power 5, I guess you could say, team left in this. I think pretty much the only one, actually, or outside of Gonzaga. But Houston is a dangerous team, and they're going up against Kentucky, who I think is a team that's vulnerable. We'll talk about them in a few minutes, but I think Houston has a really great opportunity here. They do so many things well, like I said. They can shoot the 3 also. So I think Houston's a team that can get a win over Kentucky, can get into that Elite Eight, and then give either North Carolina or Auburn a ton of problems, especially with the way they're playing right now. I mean, they are so motivated. They have absolutely just crushed both teams they've played. They destroyed Georgia State 84-55 in the first round. They took care of Ohio State, beat them by 15, and were able to pull away towards the end, but were able to respond every time the Buckeyes tried to crawl back into it. So I really like Houston. And then the other dangerous team, and this is, I think, the team that I think is the most dangerous, and I'm not just saying that because they're a 12 seed that got all the way to the Sweet 16. I'm saying it because they're just damn good, and that's the Oregon Ducks. And they have a matchup going up against Virginia, who we'll talk about in a second here, but Oregon is so versatile. They're a long team. They're athletic. They knock down a ton of three-point shots. And I think the two biggest guys for them are, one, Peyton Pritchard, who has been dynamite, the point guard for them. He's averaging 18.5 points per game so far in the tournament through 2 games. He's getting assists. He's defending well. I mean, he is just that gritty, hard-nosed player that you love to see, and a player that thrives in the chaos that is the NCAA tournament. I mean, he is just shooting the ball so well, seeing the court better than he has maybe in his whole career. He's playing some fantastic basketball. And the other guy is Kenny Wooten. Kenny Wooten, the lengthy forward for the Ducks. He is just become a defensive force in this tournament. He already was, but he has taken his defensive play up to another level. And you look at his game against UC Irvine, 11 points, solid in the offensive end, got a steal. But the number that jumps out to me is 7 blocks against the Anteaters. I mean, he is becoming a legit rim protector, just using his length and using his instincts to block a ton of shots. And that's going to, I think, cause some problems for Virginia. And Virginia maybe is going to have to rely on that outside shots and those outside jumpers to try and avoid Kenny Wooten, because he's starting to play the way Jordan Bell played for this Oregon team 2 years ago, the last time they made a good run into the tournament. I mean, he is becoming an elite defensive player, one of the best left in the tournament, I think. So that is going to make the Ducks incredibly dangerous. 2 teams that I think are pretty vulnerable at this point. Number 1, I think, is Kentucky. They were able to handle their first 2 opponents. Abilene Christian obviously beat them by 35, and they were able to do a nice job shutting down the 3-point barrage that usually comes from the Wofford Terriers, beating them 62-56 in the second round. But they did it without P.J. Washington. P.J. Washington is a lottery player that is going to be taken early in the NBA draft. He's versatile. He's extended his game out to have a reliable now 3-point shot, a reliable mid-range jumper. He can pound you inside. He can rebound. I mean, he is one of the best players in the country, but he's been hurt now for these first 2 games of the tournament, and his status is still unclear. And I think that Kentucky, they were able to handle business against their first 2 opponents, but I think they're going to run into an absolute buzzsaw against Houston. And I've been just so impressed with Houston, the way they've played in the first 2 games like we just talked about. I think that Kentucky is just not going to have enough to handle the Cougars of Houston, and I think that Houston's going to end up getting the victory in that Sweet 16 matchup, but Kentucky's going to have a really strong performance from the rest of that supporting cast. Travis Reed's going to have to be big as well. The transfer from Stanford, I mean, he has been good all year, but he's going to have a monster game against Houston, rebounding and scoring the basketball. And if he's not able to do that, then I think Houston's going to be able to advance. So I think Kentucky is really vulnerable right now. The other team that's really vulnerable, I think, is Virginia. And Virginia they were kind of the target of a lot of jokes and memes on Twitter and stuff this weekend because they were getting beaten at halftime by Gardner-Webb, the 16 seed, and everyone was saying, oh no, history repeating itself, UMBC all over again. But they were able to pull away, win that game by 15, 71-56. And then they took care of business by 12 against the Oklahoma Sooners in the second round. But in both games, they've looked... I don't know if in the first half of that first game, if it was more of just, oh no, it's happening all over again, or Gardner-Webb just came out with nothing to lose and was shooting the ball incredibly well. I'm not sure what exactly it was, but it seemed like they were tight. They were tense, they were tight, and they were feeling like we have to do much better than we did last season. We have to win a national title to erase the memory of what happened last year in the first round of the tournament. And it seemed like they were putting a lot of pressure on themselves when they didn't really need to. I mean, Virginia was, I think, going to beat Gardner-Webb all along, but they were just playing so tight and careful that really looks not something you would expect from this Tony Bennett team and the way this Virginia team has played all year. A team that only lost 2 games all season. So I was really surprised to see that, but they were able to get the victory, and they were able to get the second victory as well over the Sooners in the second round. But now going up against Oregon, this Oregon team, like we said, is playing so incredibly well right now. They ran through the Pac-12 tournament. They've run through their first 2 games. I mean, they're outscoring their opponents right now in the NCAA tournament 145 to 108. So, I mean, I'm no math whiz, but that's a 37-point advantage that they've been outscoring their opponents. I mean, they have been burying teams, and they've been playing incredibly on the defensive end, only holding or allowing their opponents to score 54 points in both games. So Oregon is playing its best basketball, and they might be the hottest team right now in the tournament. But the other thing is, we know Virginia at times in this Tony Bennett era has had trouble scoring the basketball. They've been great defensively, but they've had trouble scoring. And I think they're now going to run into maybe the second best defensive team, or at least the team that is playing the second best defense right now in the tournament is Oregon. And I think they're going to have a lot of trouble with Oregon, a lot of trouble with the length of Oregon, the shot blocking of Oregon. It's going to make them have to take a lot of three-point shots, and they have the guys that are capable of doing that in Kyle Guy, DeAndre Hunter, and Ty Jerome, but I think it's going to take them out of a lot of what they want to do, and I think this is a game that I wouldn't be surprised at all if this final score was 56-52 or something either way. I mean, it's kind of a toss-up, but I think it's going to be a very low-scoring game, and that really favors either team, as they both love to play on the defensive end. So I think Virginia right now has to play their best game of the tournament. I mean, it has to be their best from here on out, but one of their best games of the season against the Oregon Ducks to stop this surging Pac-12 team that is kind of the last hope for the Pac-12, a conference that I've certainly maligned all year and made fun of and been the brunt of jokes, but they're the last hope for the Pac-12, and Oregon's going to have to play some of their best basketball of the season if they want to be able to handle the Ducks of Oregon. But another team that I think, I'm not going to say is vulnerable, but a team that I'm going to say there's a recipe now for how to defeat them. There's a game plan to defeat them, and that's the Duke Blue Devils. And they were able to escape by 1 point over UCF in what was one of the highest-rated March Madness games in like 20 years. It was one of the highest-rated games. Everyone tuned in, and it was a fantastic game as well. Aubrey Dawkins put on a show against his dad's alma mater. He was fantastic in that game. There were so many storylines, Taco Fall, Zion Williamson. But what UCF decided to do is pack the paint and dare Duke to shoot threes. And I even saw the gif of the UCF players saying, hey, shoot it. But Duke was still able to get some pretty good looks and knock enough down that they were able to keep the Knights honest in that game. They went like 10 of 25 from three. Zion Williamson hit like 3 of them. RJ Barrett hit enough. Cam Reddish finally started to hit some long-range shots, even though he didn't have a stellar game. And Trey Jones knocked some down too. So they were able to hit enough three-point shots to keep them honest, but they're one of the they're like ranked like 300th and something in the country in 3-point shooting. So I think other teams are kind of deciding now that, hey, maybe this is the way to defeat them. You just kind of, don't go for an alley-oop at the end of the game when you can kind of close it out, or maybe you got to make sure you do more on Zion or whatever it is. But I think the game plan now against the Blue Devils is pack the paint, try to rotate as many bigs in as possible to just hack away at Zion and those guys and just make the driving lanes smaller and altogether disappear for them, and dare him to shoot 3-point shots. And even though Duke was able to knock down enough in this game, I'm not sure if they'll be able to keep that going because, like I said, they haven't been a great 3-point shooting team all year. And if it comes down to Zion and R.J. Barrett playing hero ball, I mean, there's no other guys in the country you would like to have to do that. But I think UCF exposed maybe the one weakness of Duke, and that is that, or put together a game plan that can expose the weaknesses of Duke on a night where they aren't shooting 10 of 25 from 3. The only thing I would say, though, is if other teams want to replicate this game plan against the Blue Devils, they don't have a 7-6 Taco Fall. And Taco Fall was as good as advertised. For those that weren't familiar with his game, they just knew there was a 7-6 guy that played in the American down in Orlando. A lot of people tuned in and wanted to see this exciting matchup between him and Zion, and we got a few, instances where they butted heads a little bit, but they really didn't have that signature Taco blocked Zion or Zion dunked on Taco. We didn't see that, but we certainly saw his impact, and he, both on offense and defense, he had double-digit points, he got rebounds, he got blocks. I mean, he was a force, and I don't know if other teams are going to be able to replicate that kind of rim protection, that kind of just disruption that he creates, because even when he's not blocking shots, he is altering them just by his mere presence in the lane. So I'm not sure if teams are going to be able to replicate this to the success that UCF had, but certainly there is a game plan now. There's a recipe of how to beat the Blue Devils, or how to at least keep yourself in the game and make things interesting. And we'll see if Virginia Tech and Buzz Williams are going to be able to do something similar and try to stifle the Blue Devils. But I'm not saying they're vulnerable, but I'm saying there now is the secret's out. There's a way now and a plan that's been put together of how to make them uncomfortable, how to make them do what they don't want to do. And credit to UCF and Johnny Dawkins, they were able to come up with that. And now the rest of the field is going to be playing copycat and trying to do what they did to the Blue Devils on Sunday. But before we wrap things up here, I have some final thoughts of something that it obviously took place last Friday, but it was Thursday when Michigan State took on Bradley, the 15 seed in the first round. And it's obviously kind of old news now, but it's something that I haven't really gotten an opportunity to, express my thoughts on. And that's the clip of Tom Izzo, head coach of Michigan State, yelling in the face of freshman Aaron Henry. They started the second half on a 10-0 run. Michigan State jumped out to a lead. Some great plays down the stretch there, and they called a timeout. And as the team was coming over, excited, happy, they just went on this 10-0 run. Tom Izzo meets Aaron Henry at half court, and he's wagging his finger in his face, and he's poking him in the stomach, screaming irate in his face. And a lot of the media really took offense to this. A lot of people were unhappy that Tom Izzo would treat his player this way or yell at his player this way. And then when they got to the huddle, you saw on the clip as well that he tried to get in his face again, and his players had to kind of hold him back. Well, it was Cassie Swinson, the guard, had to kind of hold him back there. But here's what I'm going to say. Tom Izzo is one of the best coaches in the game, maybe ever. I mean, he's been to Final Fours. He is got the wins. He's got the pedigree. He's got the players to the league. I mean, he is one of the best to ever do it. And when players go to Michigan State, they know what they are signing up for. They are going to be coached hard. He is going to get the best out of them and make them the best basketball player that they can be. And he's going to do that by his methods. He's going to yell. He's going to scream. He's going to get in your face. But off the court, he's going to treat you like a son. He is going to love up his players. I mean, he is going to treat them like family, maybe even more so than other programs in the country. And you saw the outpouring of support from former players in the NBA now, whether it's Draymond Green or Miles Bridges. I mean, those guys all said, I stayed at Michigan State because of the atmosphere, because of the environment there, and because I knew it made me a better player, and because Tom Izzo genuinely loves his guys. And everyone got upset and was saying that he needed to apologize or that he was out of line. Should you not be wagging your finger in your player's face? Should we not be meeting them at half court? Maybe. But the yelling, come on. What are we doing? Are we really that emotional and easily offended that when a basketball player yells at it, or a basketball coach yells at his player, that we're going to get upset by it and say that he needs to apologize? Last time I checked, coaches yell at players. Coaches yell at players because they want to get the best out of them, because they know they can be better, because they know they're not giving 100%, and they want them to be the best they can be. Maybe that's not for every coach, but I certainly know that's the case for Tom Izzo. And the fact that everyone is upset, it's one thing if he would have put his hands on him, if it was an abusive situation, but it's not. We know that it is not in the case of Michigan State. This isn't Bobby Knight. So the fact that everyone was so upset and up in arms that he yelled at his player, so what? And I get that there's this power dynamic of the coach that gets millions of dollars and the player that gets nothing, and how that may be a bad kind of optics of him yelling at him after this 10-0 run. First of all, they were on a 10-0 run, but if you talk to Tom Izzo, he certainly wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. And it was all about effort for Tom Izzo. And you could be on a 10-0 run, but you could still be not boxing out. You could still be not getting back on defense. And at this point of the season, Tom Izzo said, the player said, my bad. There's no more my bads. A my bad gets you eliminated. And a my bad when you're a freshman gets your senior teammates never a college basketball game again in their career. And they want to keep this thing rolling as long as they can. So at this point, if someone beats you because they're the best players in the conference, in the country, fine, it happens. But if it's a my bad because you didn't get back on defense, or you didn't close out on a shot, or box out a rebound, well, then that is on you. That is your bad, and you need to improve that. So I have no problem at all with Tom Izzo yelling at his players. But the fact that there's this, people are talking about this power dynamic of the millionaire coach yelling at this player who gets paid nothing. I'm the biggest advocate for playing compensating players there is, outside of Jay Billis. I absolutely think they should be able to make money off their likeness. They should be getting some sort of compensation from this billion-dollar industry. But if you look in that huddle, when Cassius Winston was grabbing Tom Izzo, what he was saying to him is he was saying, we got this. Relax. Let's take a step back. We'll take care of it. And that's the culture at Michigan State. He's going to yell at his players and get in their face, but there's a mutual respect there. There's a family environment. You never yell at your family. If you yell at your family, you can give it right back to them. They can give it right back to you. That's the kind of mature, I guess, mutual respect that is present in that environment in Michigan State, is that his players felt empowered enough and felt respected enough that they could grab him and say, relax, we got it, we can handle it. And I think that's what I think not enough people are looking at, is the fact that that his players, they feel comfortable enough, they feel empowered enough to be able to do that. So before we get all up in arms about a coach yelling at a player, because let's be honest, if someone would have heard some of the stuff that my high school said, if people would hear the stuff that my high school coach said to us, they would lose their minds. Their brains would melt, because you know what? It's vulgar. It's not politically correct. But you know what it is? It's motivation. It's how coaches are. It's how sports are played. And I think everyone needs to relax, because every coach has his style. There's many different ways to skin a cat, and this is just the way Tom Izzo does it. And, you want to say that Coach K doesn't do this because he has that old grandpa demeanor? No, if you were right there on the sideline listening to Coach K or Roy Williams or any of those guys, they are just as foul-mouthed and vulgar as any other coach in the country. They just kind of do it in a different demeanor and do it in a different way. So let's all take a step back, relax, and not be so up in arms and offended about everything, because it's basketball, it's sport, and it's on the biggest stage, and there is one goal. It is to win a national championship. It is to get to the Final Four and finish the job, and you have to give every ounce of effort you have. And if someone's not doing that, then the coach should get in their face and say something. If I was a player, I know I certainly would want my coach to do that for me. But with that being said, that's going to do it for us here on this edition of the Corner 3 on Pittsburgh Sports Live. As always, make sure you subscribe. Pittsburgh Sports Live on YouTube helps us out a lot. Lets us keep the lights on in this place, keep things rolling. And also, make sure to follow us on Twitter as well at Pittsburgh Sports Live. Follow me on Twitter, Cale_Berger, for any of my college basketball NBA takes. If you like memes, I got memes. I got it all. But make sure you check that out as well. Give me a follow. But once again, this is the Corner 3 on Pittsburgh Sports Live in the Beaver County Auto Studios. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week.